Good afternoon and welcome to the special meeting of the Federal Way City Council for July 18th, 2023. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Recording in progress.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, we are here for a special study session with a very special guest, none other than our King County Assessor, John Arthur Wilson. Mr. Wilson, thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Farrell. Thank you, Council President Kochmeyer and the other council members. It's such a pleasure to be here in Federal Way. Thought what we do today is kind of walk quickly through kind of how assessments work, what it means to you, and bring you some good news of some potential property tax relief. And that in an age where it seems like that's a rarity, but let's see if we can't get rocking and rolling here. I want to give you a quick peek of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what DOA actually does, how property values are set, where your property tax dollar goes, what's happening to those values and taxes now, and a senior exemption and what it could mean to you, and some possible property tax relief that we hope to take to Olympia. So let's get going. First of all, I want to make very clear, we don't set taxes, we set values. As you all know, you're the ones that set taxes by setting the budget each year, and we work with you in collaboration to figure out what you need. We do set and update values on more than 720,000 parcels throughout King County. That's residential and commercial. We physically inspect by state law properties once every 6 years. The other 6, we use a computer-assisted modeling system to set market values, and we respond to residential and commercial appeals. Last year topped to 9,000. This year it may well be more. And we administer exemptions and we calculate levy codes. Now, generally the process starts with that inspection in the field, the data collection we get from that to see whether there's been some significant change to your property. Then we establish the assessed value. Then we get from you and other governments their budget asks in the fall of each year. We calculate levy rates. Tax bills are mailed out. I've never understood why, but by state law, we send tax bills out on Valentine's Day. Nothing says we love you taxpayers like a tax bill in the morning. But somebody in Olympia has a really keen sense of humor. I don't quite get it, but who knows? And then tax payments are due twice a year at the end of April and the end of October. And generally, values are set on kind of classic real estate considerations: the location of the property, the market, the condition of it, the neighborhood it's in, and the age. In the case of assessments, we use 2 separate age factors. We use when that property was initially built, and then if there has been significant remodeling to that property, we look at what is the effective age of that property as you modernize it. By state law, we are trying to set values that reflect the true and fair or market value. And that value is based upon the highest and best use of the land, given the zoning and the probable use, not the possible use, but the probable use. And property values generally in the commercial sector, more so than the residential, are set by market sales, income generation, or the cost of construction. Now, property taxes are based upon the budget requests from 155 taxing districts, including Federal Way. We calculate tax rates for nearly 600 separate levy codes. And in a community like Federal Way, you will often find that there are a variety of levy codes that go into each part of Federal Way that may be different from one side of the street to the other. Your tax bill, thus, is very location specific. And it covers a variety of things: K-12 education, first responders, Sound Transit gets some, Parks and Recreation throughout the county, the Port of Seattle, and local governments like yours in King County. Now, what this means is we have the county broken into 85 residential inspection areas. And this is a map from 22, and you will see in an area in a red spot, right in the kind of center of the county there, is Sammamish. That's where my beloved fiance lived until recently. I used to be able to only visit her under the cover of darkness wearing a plain brown paper bag with 2 eye holes, because I raised their values over 50% year over year. Literally the highest year-to-year value in the state, because it was a super hot real estate market. It did not make me the most popular person in Sammamish, although I was there last Thursday and lived to tell about it. So there's some hope, because I brought them some good news. What we saw in '22 for '23 taxes is taxes were up overall about 21.8%. That varies by community, and we'll show you specifically Federal Way here in just a moment. In Federal Way, your values were up last year by a little over 25% to $551,000, the median value. Your taxes, however, only went up 8.8%. And this is an important distinction to make sure that taxpayers understand. Just because your value goes up a percentage does not mean that your property taxes are going to go up the equivalent percentage. And in fact, in most cases, it's about half to a third of what the value increase has been. And in fact, this year, we're still pulling numbers out of Federal Way. We believe values will be down a bit by about 7%. And depending on what you do as far as your budget, could have an effect on whether property taxes remain roughly the same or might even go down a little bit. In Sammamish, as I mentioned, 51.2% to 1.5, almost 1.6 million. But taxes went up 21%. This year, their values were down 23%. Redmond's another example. We have 44.2% on a $1.4 million home. Taxes, though, were 23%, about $10,000 a year. And then this year, Redmond is down about 21%. Part of what we're seeing here is the phenomena of COVID. We thought at the beginning of the pandemic we would frankly see the real estate market on the residential side take a hit. It did not, and in fact, just the opposite happened. When we looked at why that happened, it started to make sense. Everybody was ordered out of the office and back to home to work from home. And what you found was couples that were working from home finally reached a point where they said, honey, I love you, but we need more space. And so what you saw is them either buy larger homes, larger apartments, move out of the area to a larger piece of property where they didn't have to commute in that. And that caused actually real estate values in certain parts of the county to go up. Now, right now, what's up with property taxes is for '23, we collect $7.2 billion worth of property taxes. Revenues in King County were up $436 million. This is where your property tax dollar goes. And you can see a bulk of it, about 43%, goes to state schools, K-12 education. That is driven in large measure by the McCleary decision by the state Supreme Court and the legislature's response 5 years ago to that. You can see King County, we get about 17%. Cities get about another 17, 15%. Fire, others. Even in King County, we even have a cemetery district in Vashon Island that gets property taxes. Now, of that $7.2 billion, it's split between what comes out of the commercial real estate sector and what comes out of the residential sector. Brace yourself. I'm going to show you what that division is and the ratio. The residential sector pays 82.5 of that 7.2 billion. The commercial sector pays 17.5. Now, it's not that it's meant to be that way, but the reality is year after year over the last 5 to 10 years, we have had double-digit increases in the residential real estate market. And that has caused an overall shift in value from the commercial to the residential side. That's why we think it's time for a Homeowner Relief Act, and we'll talk a bit about that in just a minute. But you can see this is not fair and equitable. And it's not that I'm at all anti-business. I want to see businesses thrive in King County, thrive here in Federal Way. But we've got to rebalance this to get it somewhere closer to some form of equilibrium. Now, I want to talk about the senior exemption. And I can't tell you how important this is, and I make my pledge, Mayor, to you and to the council members, we'll be happy to come back. We'll set up shop, and we'll help people get enrolled in the program, because look at what it does. To be a senior, you have to be the owner-occupant of the house, 61 at the time of application, and right now, a household income of $58,423. And that's after deductions. It's a total net profit. So if you have dividends or that over, as Councilman Dovey asked me, if you're over that, unfortunately, you probably don't qualify. On the other hand, if you look, we went down to Olympia and we got revisions to the senior exemption program. New law provides and protects seniors from the COLA increase that happened this year of 8.7%. You know, I was really concerned when I heard that on the one hand, thank God seniors were getting some relief through higher Social Security payments. But the last thing we wanted to have happen was have the federal government giveth and we through the property tax take it away. And so we went down to Olympia And this is one of the few pieces of legislation this session that passed through both houses of Olympia. Houses of Olympia, where they often seem to have trouble even agreeing that the sun rises in the east, that passed unanimously without a single dissenting vote, because they recognized how important that was. So we adjust the income thresholds now every 3 years rather than 5. We adjusted the thresholds higher. We can go into more detail if you'd like with that. And the final law that passed and was signed by Governor Inslee will apply to the 2023 income people are earning right now, to their 24 taxes. And here's what that can look like. In 2019, the threshold was set at a little over $40,000. And in '23, it will go to 51. The partial assessment exemption was at 49, it'll go up to 61. And the standard deduction, the higher end income, 58,423, will go to at least 72,000, and some numbers we've seen lately from the Department of Revenue indicate it may even top $80,000. We won't know for a few months on exactly how much further up that'll go. But here is what the savings can be, and look at these numbers. This is for a home at $789,000. That's the median value of a home throughout King County. In that full exemption at the lowest income level, it's almost $5,000 a year. Think about that. $5,000 that people get to keep. $5,000 they can use for everyday expenses, for health care, for food, for just keeping a roof over their head. Even at the middle level, it's $3,100. And if you're at that higher end, it's still just under $3,000 a year. And this is not a loan, it's not a lien against your property. We'll talk about a deferral in a moment. This is an outright exemption from certain property taxes that reduces the burden for those taxpayers that qualify. And that's why I went to Olympia and fought so hard for this, because those citizens of our community that have lived here, been a part of how we have grown and prospered, deserve a break. And it was time that Olympia responded, and I'm pleased that they finally did. If you look here, there's also a deferral. Works similar to the exemption program, must be the owner occupant, 61. The income threshold is a little higher, in that it's 67,411. Now that did not change. The wrinkle though is the deferral means that you pay the first half of your property taxes. The balance is then deferred, but a lien is placed against your property. And that deferred amount, plus a 5% interest, has to be paid in full at the time of sale, death of the homeowner, or if it's no longer a primary residence. What we find is in the entire county, we have only about 1,000 people enrolled in this deferral program, because a lot of seniors, they've paid off their mortgage. The last thing they want to do is incur some new lien, especially one from the state. So while we make it available to people, we frankly encourage people, if at all possible, try to qualify for the exemption program. Now, if people need help filing a deferral or an exemption, we'll be glad to work with you. People can call this number, area code 206-296-3920. Now, we're not quite a 24/7 call center, so operators aren't standing by right this moment, but Monday through Fridays, they are available during normal work hours. And in fact, even some Friday afternoons, I've had my team working. I was in Bothell a few months ago, and they told about how they got like a half dozen calls from the team on a Friday evening because they wanted to make sure people got through the program and qualified. You can also file online if you'd like, and this is a very intuitive system that we tried to design. We've had it in operation for 3 years. Right now, we are getting roughly 9,000 applications a year for the senior exemption program. So we're trying to look at ways we can streamline that. The other thing I'd like to mention is, as I hinted at, I believe strongly that it is time that Washington State join roughly the other 44 states in the country that have what's called oftentimes a homestead or a homeowner exemption. And what we're looking at is working with assessors across the state. And in fact, I was at a meeting just this morning of the Washington Association of County with fellow assessors and other county officials to talk about a system where we would take and split your property tax bill so that on the state share for K-12 education, we would take $350,000 or some percentage off the top of that, and it would be a tax shift to higher end properties, but it would be a tax cut to thousands and thousands of working families and homeowners that would mean real money again in their pocket from a property tax savings. We think that this is absolutely imperative at a time when people are dealing with inflation, dealing with wages that aren't keeping pace with that inflation, and property taxes that have been going at a double-digit clip. Now, this will require a heavy lift, and I will ask for your support down the road, hopefully, when we go to Olympia, and we'll ask for both enabling legislation for this exemption, and it will require a constitutional amendment to create a limited modification to the uniformity clause. But we think this is an important step forward. I'm pleased that it has, so far, we have been building statewide and bipartisan support. One of my closest partners on this project is a fellow named Tom Konis, who is the Republican County Assessor in Spokane. And Tom and I have been working hand in glove. I was just talking to him just a few minutes ago to try to make sure this becomes a reality, because we think homeowners in King County, homeowners across this state deserve a break. And we think this is a break that is fair and equitable to all. With that, I would be delighted to take any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Assessor. Our Council President, Linda Kuchmar.
Thank you very much, John, for all of your hard work on behalf of our citizens. So I have a couple of questions because you were going really fast.
Sorry.
So that's okay. Just a lot of like drinking from the fire hose. So as far as I'm understanding, for 2023, the maximum household income is 72,000, correct?
For
2023.
23 income in 24.
For 24. So sure. So what? That's the future.
Right,
So is that after all deductions?
right,
And that's whether you're married or not?
correct.
Just the household income?
Yeah,
So
it's
you
how-
could have, you know, persons in the household that they're responsible for, but it would be the household income.
If they aren't providing income to the household as far as paying for a mortgage or
Right.
stuff like that, if they're simply living in the house,
Right.
we don't count
We
that.
had grandparents that are taking care of grandchildren because the adult children aren't capable.
Right,
And so then that would make their household income go down because, they'd have more deductions.
right.
So they would have
As long as they aren't, I'd have to double check, Council President Coachman, but I believe if it's grandparents taking care of next of kin grandchildren, that's not counted against them.
no, but it would be, when they do their taxes, they get to count them as a deduction.
Right,
And so that would make their deductions.
right, it'd make their income go down.
Correct,
And that,
yeah.
correct.
Okay, so, so that's interesting to know. And then, when you said you have, we have a lot of, we're not like Redmond or Bellevue, so we don't have higher income properties for the most part here. We have more of a majority of middle income and lower.
Right.
And so we would, very likely, our citizens might benefit from the new Homestead Act that you're talking about. Yeah,
Actually, what you would see in King County overall is in like a community like Federal Way, some of your tax burden, frankly, would shift to like a Bellevue or a Redmond and that.
well, it's about time, actually, because they
You won't
seem to
get an
all
argument
benefit.
from me.
Back to the Growth Management Act of 1990, they sent us all the lower income and the lower income housing, and they put all the jobs there, and I think it's about time they shared they helped us share in the wealth.
I agree, and that's part of what we were trying to do is, within the county and within the state,
Sure.
rebalance it in that so that it reflects a little bit more on everybody paying their fair share.
So my final question is, you know, obviously this is a lot of information, it's hard to digest. How can we get this out in a kind of an easy format so people can understand what's going on?
We've got some material we are producing right now, and we'll be happy to get that to you so you can distribute it through whatever means. You certainly are welcome to share this deck that you have and post it on the city's website. There is information on our website related to this. And part of what I'm doing, frankly, these days is a traveling roadshow, and trying to hit as many cities as I can. And as I would proffer again, and Mayor Farrell and I chatted a bit about this, we would love to come back at the appropriate time, and we'll bring some of our exemption specialists, some laptops, and we'll set up a queue, and we'll start to sign people up for the program.
That's great, thank you.
Great, thank you. We've got Councilmember Walsh, the Deputy Mayor, and then Councilmember Dovey. Okay.
Yeah, just a quick question. On the income levels for the exemptions, is that based on the federal 1040 return, or what's that based on?
It's based on the 1040, but it is not necessarily the adjusted gross income, because the challenge we have, and we've gone back and forth with Olympia over this, is some of the exemptions that the state will allow, the feds do not, and some of the exemptions that the feds allow, the state will not. So we have to work over, and what we're trying to do, especially in the realm of healthcare expenses, is figure out sort of, if you will, a standard healthcare deduction that people can take, much like they can on their federal taxes and that. But generally speaking, yeah, it is based off of what your federal tax return is.
Okay. And then next, for the senior exemptions, do people need to reapply each year, or is it a number of years, or what?
The exemption is for 4 years, and then you go through a renewal process. And what we are in the process now is looking at how we can largely automate that process. For example, when the thresholds changed from $40,000 up to the 58, we took everybody that was at the $40,000 level, and we moved them all instantly into the highest tax break category as we could. We didn't make them reapply or file new paperwork. I just said, look, let's not make this more cumbersome on taxpayers than it absolutely needs to be. We know what their income number is. It's below this threshold, so give them the best rate that we've got. And we'll try to be doing that as we move forward. We're right now in the process of doing renewals and that, and our team works on those each week to try to get people re-upped on the program.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Thanks for being here. So I have two questions. On this senior exemption, you have 9,000 applications a year. Is that for all of King County?
That's for all of King County.
How many people do you think qualify for it in all of King County?
In all of King County, under the new thresholds, my guess, based upon the last census data I've looked at, is probably around 100,000 people.
Wow.
We have about 25 to 27,000 now enrolled in the program. It is, if you will, the best-kept secret of local government. And that's why I'm so appreciative of having a chance to appear before you tonight, is to get that word out, because there are countless citizens that just don't know it exists. And I have literally had taxpayers in tears about their property taxes, and also blessed them in tears of joy when they found out they qualified for the exemption and it meant they could stay in that house. And that's my primary driver, is I don't want anyone taxed out of their home ever.
One more question.
Yeah, of course.
When you say you physically inspect residents every 6 years, do you just look at what you can see from the street, or do you actually walk around the residence, and do you let people know when you're in the neighborhood?
All of the above. What we do routinely is, when we are about to go into a neighborhood and a physical inspection, we will, through social media, through local media, through things like the patch system, the Federal Way Mirror, and that, we'll let people know we're going to be in this area. Our people carry ID with them. They have vests that identify them as staff members of the Department of Assessments. They at times may ring a doorbell, talk to you, ask if they can take a look inside, and that. I will tell you, I did have to draw the line, though. We had some folks that were a little over-aggressive and were pressing their noses to windows. And one of them said to me, "But I bring Windex." And I said, "I really don't care that you brought Windex. That's intrusive. Don't do that anymore." But we want to make sure, part of what we also do, you know, Councilmember Honda, is we pull permit data from each community. So we get an idea of, has there been something significantly done? We keep also up-to-date, highly detailed aerial imaging files, so we can see, look, has there been something significantly changed to the footprint of that property, where they bumped out to go add a room or expand a kitchen, or they went up a story and that. And we look for those things to try to figure out whether there's any significance. Otherwise, in most cases, our team will be out walking your neighborhood, doing a quick quick look to see whether it matches up with the photographs we have in that.
If someone did not want one of your employees in their home or walking around their house, can they say no?
They can certainly say no to access into the house. By state law, we are allowed to be on the property. It's codified in the RCWs. But I generally advise our field folks, don't make an issue of it. You know, be respectful of the homeowner. And if they don't want you, look, we have at times in parts of the county encountered people that come out to greet my staff with guns. And I tell them, no value-setting exercise is worth you endangering your life or that of others. So if that's the case, get back in the car and we'll do it another way.
If the condition of the property is worse than it was 6 years prior, do you actually decrease their taxes?
Then it can have an effect that we will lower the value of the property. Sometimes it can also be things like, I'll give you an example. In Seattle, in the Madison Park neighborhood, a fellow got his reval notice, and he said, you have that I have a view property. I don't have a view property. Well, we looked at the map. We said, yes, you have a view property. He said, no, come and look at my property. He was right. But what it was in the adjoining lot, his neighbor had a huge Douglas fir tree that over those past 6 years had vastly expanded its span. And the view he once had of Lake Washington was gone. He no longer had a view property. So we changed his value, lowered it, and lowered his taxes. Now, it can also work the other way. Several years ago, we had some residents in West Seattle who were complaining that the long, kind of willowy trees were blocking their view of the city skyline. So in the middle of the night, they had someone come out and chop down those trees. Well, first, that's against the law. Second, it's not particularly environmentally friendly. And second, it will affect your assessed value. So I sent out my residential division director and my chief appraiser. We looked and said, they now have view property. And we raised their values. And the city of Seattle went after them for fines for the destruction of the trees and that.
And one more question that
Sure.
just came up. Are there more seniors who qualify for the exemption in South King County than North King County?
It's kind of both ends of the county.
Okay.
There are parts of north and northwest King County where there is a somewhat higher concentration than, for example, you get into east and northeast King County. And then when you get down here into South County, it tends to be proportionately a little bit higher as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Councilmember Dovey.
Yeah, what are the timelines when someone should apply, and is there cutoffs? I mean,
Yeah. There are no cutoffs per se in that you can apply anytime during that year, and we will back it to the beginning of that year. So let's say you didn't file your application for 23 until November, but you qualified for all of 23. Well, we don't say you only get it till November. We go back to January 1 and say, okay, you get it for the whole year. The same also goes true that if you would have qualified, we can go back 3 years under state law. If, let's say, your income was such that you might have qualified as early as 2020, if you can provide us documentation of that, we'll go back, we'll adjust for those prior years, and we'll send you, technically we send you a warrant, not a check, but it's the same thing. But it means you can get some back property tax.
so let me just clarify what you said. If somebody actually qualified in 2020 but didn't know about the program, and they've continued to qualify, you'll go back and look at as far back as 2020, and they could get some great relief on,
Right.
that's pretty generous, that's nice.
Well, isn't that how government should work?
I think it's great.
You know, I mean, look, I view that we are stewards of your money. And if we have, on the one hand, I think every taxpayer should pay what they owe, but they shouldn't pay a dime more than they owe. And if it turns out through a variety of circumstances that we collected more than we should have, we should give it back to you, because after all, it's your money. And that you've worked hard for it. and you could probably find a use for it. And so that's just, to me, the right thing to do.
That's great to hear, Mr. Assessor. We did want to let you know that we'll send out your PowerPoint and with a press release up to our local paper, the Federal Mirror, to make sure that we can get this into our local paper and let people know about this.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mayor. Really appreciate it.
And do we have any other questions? All right. Well,
Thank you
so much.
all.
Appreciate it. All right, that concludes the purpose of the special meeting. We'll be adjourned until 6:30 for the regular course business.